If I could ask everyone to grab a seat, we'll get started here. Some few more will be straggling in with their treats. That's okay. So thanks to all who are here today. This is our second community panel. We're happy to welcome Don Knight from City Council, Colonel Ronald Fitch from Fort Carson, Bill Ayen from UCCS, and Claire Anderson from the Center for Innovations in Aging. I'm going to go ahead and let John get us started.
Okay, thank you. John Thompson moderating this morning, also last week. I was told that John needs to introduce Mr. Knight specifically.
It's my pleasure to introduce Don Knight. Don is the councilman for the first district.
District 1, right?
Up in the northwest part of the city. He's also my golf partner on Saturdays and Thursdays and Tuesdays. And also being out there on the golf course. A small world story. My last assignment in the Air Force, I was in Warner Robins, Georgia, and I was at Reserve Command, and I worked with a Brigadier General Elaine Knight, and she was a reservist at the Pentagon, and I worked a lot of different IT issues with her for reservists. I retired from the Air Force. Kathy and I moved back here, and I started playing golf with these guys on Saturday mornings up at the Academy. Don Knight was one of the people I played golf with. But it took me 2 years to realize he was married to Elaine Knight. Don is a good friend of mine. He's a retired Air Force colonel, worked in space most of his time. He was the commander up at Cheyenne Mountain.
Deputy commander. Deputy commander. Oh, okay. No, I don't mind standing. So, well, thank you very much for doing this. When John told me about it, of course, we were on the golf course and asked if I'd be interested. I said, obviously, yes. Not only because John's a great friend, but also I think this is a great purpose. But being a great friend, I think, I don't know if he's mentioned it, but he and Kathy have their 40th anniversary at the end of next month, so congratulations to you guys. So he asked me to come and talk about the biggest issue that we're having in city and how the church can help. And speaking of Kathy, that biggest issue is our deer, and Kathy is going to help us, right?
Yeah.
No, we do have a problem with the deer, and John always tells me on the golf course, Kathy says, if you kill any of the deer, she's going to hide my body too. So let's just put it that way. Obviously, when John brought this to me, the first thing I thought about was one of our biggest problems is the homeless. But I know you guys are tackling that. John told me you had Andy Phelps here last week to talk about it. Your pastor wrote the letter to the mayor that went in there. And also, I know you guys also host our families every year. And I think it's the second week in May, so that should just be coming up. It's always when John can't play golf. That's how I remember that. So. But there is another issue that did come to mind, and I thought hopefully you guys find it that it's fits right in with you. Every year when we do the budget, the mayor delivers a budget to City Council on the first Monday of October. We go through it, and then we have a town hall. And generally every year that we have that town hall, the majority of people that come, and there's not that many that actually come and ask us to do it, but it centers around transportation. And to be quite frank, our bus system in Colorado Springs is not the best in the world. It gets, when you pay your 8.25 cents when you buy something, 1% of that goes to PPRTA, Pikes Peak Regional Transportation Authority. 55% of that goes to projects that are on the A list, the B list, the C list. So when that got approved by the voters, there was a list of projects that are going to be done with that. 35% goes to road maintenance. The other 10% goes to Mountain Metro. And that's basically the crux of the funding for our bus system. We did have, when PPRTA got voted in by the electors, the city did have some money going to it ourselves. Not much, but we did have some. Under Steve Bach, who was mayor at that time, when the PPRTA funds came in, he reduced the city funding. And under Mayor John Suthers, it took him a couple of years, but we have restored that to the original level of effort. But when I took a bus ride, and I did a rolling office hours one time and just rode the bus around my district, I started off the trip arguing with the head of our bus system that when he gets more money, he needs to do more routes. His argument was, no, I need to take the routes I have now and increase the frequency and increase the hours. After I got done with doing that for about a half day, I converted over to his thoughts. Talking to people that ride the bus now, their biggest issues were, if I miss this bus, it's an hour before the next one comes. And really, it's the handicap that a lot of our buses, even the big ones, only have room for 2 wheelchairs. And if you're the third person in a wheelchair at that bus stop, you got to wait an hour for the next one. Another problem that we have is the time of it. And so he wanted to increase the frequency to make it a half hour. How late at night do we run? And a lot of the buses don't run until maybe they quit at 9 o'clock. Some routes are at 8 o'clock. And so he wanted to increase the hours on those. But there's really, as you look at the future of our bus system, there's really no more windfall of money that is going to be coming in. And right now we are in the heydays of bringing in a lot of sales tax and everything else. Our economy is unhealthily dependent on sales tax. When you pay your property tax, and I'll say mine is, I just paid it, it was $2,400. Maybe 125 of that went to the city. All the rest are going to the library districts, the county, the school districts. So there's not a future of there. But what I heard when we have this town hall is people are having trouble getting jobs because there's no public transportation to bring them home at night, especially if they work till 9 o'clock at night. And the bus stop, the last bus is at 9, and they don't get off of work until 9:15 or so. And really, when you look out east along Powers Boulevard, or if you're trying to get a job in our poor section of town, Councilwoman Avila likes to say it's the southeast, but in District 1 here, I go along Nevada. If you look at Nevada just north of Fillmore along Cascade, there's a whole section of mobile home trailer parks in there. And so we do have poor people all around that want to get out there, want to work, but they just can't have the public transportation to get out there. So my thought was for your organization, if there is some way that you could help those people that want a job, qualify for the job, the people are willing to hire them for the job. The only thing that's stopping that is they don't have a ride home at night. Generally the bus will get them to work if they're working. We run during that day, so it might be there. And it could be anything from just getting them, picking a few organizations, pick a stretch of Powers or pick a stretch of Nevada, and get with some businesses and say, hey, if you hire somebody, we'll give that person a ride at night. The other way to going at it is work with the Pikes Peak Workforce Center, which is up off of Garden of the Gods at the old Intel building. The county moved their service center out there several years back, and that has created a big burden on a lot of folks just trying to get there to find jobs. If you're in the southeast, and I apologize, lost my train of thought, that's where I was going with the southeast, it takes you an hour via bus to get from the southeast part of town to the workforce center to make your appointment, and then another hour to get back home. So if you're looking for something, that's my recommendation of one area that you would consider. So okay. Thank you much.
Thank you, Don. Next up, we'll have Colonel Fitch come up and give a little intro, sir, and what the major problems you're seeing in the city from your point of view, please.
Okay, sure. Thank you for having me here this morning. What a pleasure and an honor to be able to come up here and talk to you all this morning. Okay, sorry, how about there? We got better? Okay, thank you.
Don't ask don't ask the Army guy to speak out.
Yeah, I could have probably put it away, and we'll be okay too. But one, thank you, for having me here this morning. And just a little bit of background on Fort Carson. So 26,000 soldiers live there, and then when you look at our broader community with family members, we get upwards of 50,000 folks that work and live on and off the installation. Actually, living on the installation is about 14,000. And so 3/4 of our folks actually live all over the city and town, and then even getting down towards Fountain and Pueblo. We see a lot of folks living there now too as well, mostly because there's no affordable housing, and I know that's been a drumbeat issue here in the city. But that would be one thing I would say, off the top, that we can continue to advocate for. And then on the other spectrum of the soldiers, when they look to transition to get out of the Army, we have a pretty highly skilled workforce. There's a lot of jobs that are open here, and we had seen maybe 5,000 soldiers transition out of the Army every year from Fort Carson. We also get in about that many on a regular basis every month throughout the year. And so, about half of those, or 55%, 2 years ago, were staying here in the local area, and now that's dropped to about 30% or so because they have no place to live that they can afford to live to keep up with the jobs here. So affordable housing, I would come back to. That's just one issue that we would advocate for. Some additional help that we could use from an organization, a faith-based organization like this, is with the domestic violence and child neglect. It's pretty high, not just on the base, but in the whole county. I've had the opportunity to participate a lot with TESSA, the local nonprofit for domestic violence here in town, and we do offer a lot of services through our Army Community Services on post, but working with TESSA has really opened up some additional venues for that. But the one thing we looked for, working with both TESSA and then another nonprofit in town called the Citizen Soldier Connection, that's run by a gal named Elizabeth Cavedo. We look for mentor families so that we can pair a young couple, because we see a lot of our issues with the 19 to 25-year-old couple that have 2 or 3 kids. One of the military spouse may get deployed, and now you have a young spouse, whether it's a husband or a wife, that's left home alone with 3 young kids, that it just becomes overwhelming. And so to have someone who's been through that throughout in their life and can provide some, hey, everything is okay, this is normal, to some extent. I have young kids myself, and it's certainly a challenge. But you can work through it, and sometimes you just need someone to talk to and provide some experiences that you've had in your life that they can realize, okay, this is not really so overwhelming, and there's a place to go to and get help. And then I would say the third thing, currently what's ongoing right now, and it's been in the paper and the news, we've received a lot of elected official and congressional delegation support. The Army's looking to transition one of our infantry brigades to an armored brigade. That brigade will go to a tank brigade here next year, but whether it stays here at Fort Carson or goes to another base is yet to be determined. And so there's a public commentary period that's open right now till the end of the month for people to advocate for it to stay here. And so when you look at the numbers, that's about 4,000 soldiers and another 6,000 family members. It's about 10,000 people in total. If that were to leave and go to another base in Texas or Kansas or in Georgia, it's about almost a $400 million impact to the city of Colorado Springs, which gets back to a lot of the budgetary things. And then you look at the services and where they get their cars fixed and what restaurants they eat at and a lot of other things. It starts to have a pretty big impact on the community. And so we would certainly advocate for some help from the community to keep that unit here, because this is just a wonderful place to train with the varying terrain, tough terrain, and then throw the altitude on top of it. There's no better place really to be in the Army than here in Colorado Springs and serving at Fort Carson, which is the #1 requested duty station across the entire Army. It's also the #2 retiree location after San Antonio, Texas, here in Colorado Springs. So great place to be. And with that, if there's not any questions, I'll pass it on. Yes. So there's been a number of articles in the paper, and we can send back here that you can put out to your community the website email, essentially, that you would send a note to the Army Environmental Command Public Affairs, which is located in San Antonio, Texas, the #1 retiree location in the United States for military. Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
Okay. you introduce yourself to this hostile crowd?
I'm Jose Mohamedez. Well, I'll keep my comments short because John took so long to introduce Don. He took up most of my time, so I'll keep my comments.
Now it's a hostile
comments short. I'm going to speak about UCCS, and I'm retiring from there after 19 years at the end of next month. So I'll try and give a little perspective on probably less on need, but more on UCCS and how it fits into the community. When I started there, it was we had something on the order of maybe 5,000 students, something like that. Now we're at like 12,500 and growing significantly every year. Programs, I wouldn't even want to guess at how many programs have been added, but probably double what we had when I started there, including a lot of PhD programs, which are very robust now in areas like education, mechanical engineering, cybersecurity, etc. The nursing school, Bethel School of Nursing, has been a stalwart institution in this town forever, a long, long time, and I think it was a very good decision that they came under the university umbrella. We've been blessed at the university with some very strong leadership over the last 19 years, or it started really with, Linda Bennell-Shade, who was there when I came. I think her mission was to start the ball rolling to make it from a commuter school to a real university, meaning that we had 18 and 19-year-olds that could get in trouble. But they also needed services, and they also needed student center and programs. We needed to move our courses from being offered primarily in the evening to being offered starting at 8 o'clock in the morning, which I've been teaching at now for several years. Pam Shockley Zalabek, of course, everyone knows Pam. She's still active in the community. She's done a great job. And Venkat Reddy, who's the current chancellor, is a longtime friend of mine. I've been on the faculty with him for 17 of the 19 years, and very, very close to him. A couple of things that I've noticed over a period of a number of years is the fact that 19 years ago, the campus sat along Austin Bluffs Parkway. The people on campus, the faculty and staff on campus, basically didn't get south of Austin Bluff. The community didn't get north of Austin Bluff. There was not a connection. And one of the great things that's happened is a very strong connection now in terms of both the university seeing how they can support the community in many different ways, whether it be through internships, which we have literally, I think, thousands of those internships. I know in the College of Business we do probably 300 or 400 internships ongoing all the time or more, some paid, some not paid. We also, the university works with local companies and startups in that. Most recently, what we've seen a lot of connection between the university and support from the community, whether it be organizations, commercial organizations, businesses that we're connected with, or whether it be nonprofits, whether it be just individuals in the community. And so if you look at a map of the campus now, you'll see that virtually every building, almost every building, has a family name on it or an organization's name. And that doesn't happen. That's not because they just, somebody said someday, well, the dean said, I know this person, I'll put their name on. No, it's because they made a commitment. And one of those, of course, is the Ayen Center for the Arts, which I also involved with a couple different ways. And that then was a very much a community university partnership. And Darcy and I just walked through there the other day and looked at the wall of all the donors, and 2 walls in there of all the donors. And it's amazing the number of companies and number of organizations that have done that. I'm talking about that in part not to just talk about UCCS, but what I believe is a need in this community I don't have the answers for this in a specific sense, but in a broad sense, having partnerships across the community, whether it be with nonprofits, whether it be with religious organizations, whether it be with professional organizations like FCA and Air Force Association and other things. Having those partnerships is really strength of this community. And we here at Ascension have done that through our partnership with now Lutheran Family Services, with KPC Kids Place, Family Promise, and many other things that, thanks to the people in the Board of Social Outreach like Shar and those that preceded her, has been great. And I think having that partnership with organizations is important. One of the cautions on that, and one of the things that I think is important to mention is that, and Tracy Hearn from KPC Respite Center last week kind of touched on this a little bit, is that we have a lot of great organizations in this community. Tessa being one of them, I could name off a whole lot. But figure out which one is the one that meets the need of a particular individual. And then being able to get there because of bus service and other issues is a real problem. And so I know that KPC, when a client comes in and with a specific issue, they can direct them to normally one stop to get them to the right place, as opposed to them trying to get around the city to multiple places. And so I think that's an important issue. And I think we as a religious community working together, and I know we have the North Circle group of churches that work here, and Lutheran churches working together, but I think a broader religious community can be if we can be a way for people to come to a place that they can touch and get direction, that would be real positive. So I will stop there, and I'm sure that Tom and some others are going to give me some hard questions.
Thank you, Bill. Last but not least, we'll have Claire Anderson come up. Claire is a native of Colorado Springs. How many natives of Colorado Springs are there here? Yeah. So she comes from the minority group here.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I'm Claire Anderson. I'm Executive Director of Innovations and Aging Collaborative. Thanks for having us all here this morning. I came straight from my kiddos' soccer game, so I have my rain boots on for the soggy field. And I do want to mention, too, that when I moved back, I'm from Colorado Springs. I left for a long time, lived in the Midwest, and came back. And I was fortunate enough to be on the Board of Family Connections when I moved back about 10 years ago. So I'm glad to see that KPC is doing so well. Yes, hi. So I want to tell you a little bit about Innovations in Aging and what we're doing. We are a small catalytic nonprofit, and our goal is to incubate programs that fill a gap or a need in the community, and then pass that program off to the right community resource or organization when the time is right. And we're unique in that we've also been appointed by Mayor Suthers to run the Age-Friendly Colorado Springs initiative. Has anybody heard of Age-Friendly? No? Good. That's good. That's good. So Colorado Springs is an age-friendly city, and the Age-Friendly program is a program of AARP and the World Health Organization. And there's about 200 or so cities across the country that are designated as age-friendly. Interestingly enough, Manitou Springs became age-friendly, the 200th age-friendly city on December 31st of last year. So that's pretty exciting. But Colorado Springs became age-friendly in March of 2016. And what that means is you join the network of age-friendly cities and communities, and then you do the work. So for us, that meant getting together about 100 community members and experts and professionals and creating an action plan for the city of Colorado Springs for us to become as age-friendly as possible by the year 2020. And we have to report back to AARP and the World Health Organization with our progress by 2020. And in that report, there's about 150 action items that we, our large, small but mighty, I guess we could say, staff of 2, are responsible for doing over the next couple of years. So in that report, I made a couple of notes so I wouldn't forget. But in that report, there are 8 domains of livability, is what it's called, and those are things like transportation, housing, social participation, civic engagement, outdoor spaces, things like that. And so the folks who wrote the report included about 3 to 5 goals with action items in each of those areas. And we work every day to implement those things. We don't provide any direct services at Innovations in Aging. Rather, we search for partnerships and collaborations, folks that are either already doing some of these action items, folks that would be good partners for us to work on together to make these action items happen, or people that are doing it, and we can, at Innovations in Aging, can say, great, this is happening in our community, we're going to check it off the list. So some of those things, I kind of wrote myself some notes about challenges and strengths. Some of the challenges that we see from Age Friendly are related to the aging population. So you guys know this, right? The population of people 65 and over in the Pikes Peak region is projected to grow by 179% by the year 2040. And in that same time period, the population of people over 85 is projected to grow by 337%. So now is the time to prepare. And these are not, we are a great retirement community, right? And there's so many military retirees. But the majority of these people are the folks who migrated here in the 70s and 80s and 90s, right? So these people are here, they're aging in place, aging in community. We're all getting older every day, even though I'm going to try to stop. I'm going to try to stay this age, I think. But now is the time to prepare for this huge shift in the population. And through some of these initiatives, that's what we're working on. But that's the number one challenge, and that informs our work. That is why we do what we do, because now is the time to start preparing for that, so we are serving our residents as best as we can. These guys talked about the silos in our community. There is a lot of that. That's a part of the reason why Innovations in Aging was created, to help all the different amazing organizations that are doing work in the community work together and figure out if there are ways that we can collaborate, not reinvent the wheel, and get some things done because we're stronger together. I would echo transportation. That's a huge issue. All of the 8 domain areas in Age Friendly mentioned transportation as an issue. Because if you can't get to the senior center, how can you be involved in those activities? If you can't get to your doctor's appointment, how can you get the care that you need? If you can get to the grocery store or get to the food pantry or get to Silver Key, how are you going to access those resources and live your best life? So transportation really permeates all of those 8 areas. We talk a lot about isolation. Transportation is a piece of that. We have one senior center for a population of 500,000 people. Most cities our size have more than one senior center. So our Y is working on bringing some senior programming to different Y locations across the city, so that if you are closer to the Briargate Y, for example, you could access some of the senior programming there at that location if you can't make it to the senior center on Hancock. We talk a lot about walkability and bikeability. When we think about Age Friendly or talk about Age Friendly, we think about creating a city where something is good for an 8-year-old and good for an 80-year-old and everybody in between. So when we think about walkability and bikeability, that's a great way for people to get exercise, to help combat that isolation. There's a lot of people who have to walk or bike to work. There's a lot of people who want to walk or bike to work, to the store, to a coffee shop, to places they want to go. So we do a lot of advocating for things within the city that increase access to walkable and bikeable spaces and communities. The city council just voted on the bike plan, the bike master plan for the city, and we advocated for that because we just thought it was a great use of age-friendly. So many age-friendly pieces were in that plan, and it's a great way to get people out and engaged in the community. Affordable housing is something that we talk about as well. Just sort of anecdotally, we know that we are in need of 15,000 affordable units for seniors in our community. We're lacking 15,000 units. And something to think about that is also if we're making an affordable unit for a senior, or for people of any age, really, we want them to be accessible as well as affordable. And so many of our affordable units, we are so interested in making them affordable, which is important, so important and excellent, but we just miss out on that accessibility piece sometimes. And accessibility means someone could use that space if they're in a wheelchair, a walker, a mother with a stroller could use that space. Accessibility is for everyone, 8 to 80, not just seniors. Some of the strengths that I want to mention real fast. We were really excited. One of the things that all 8 domain groups in Age Friendly mentioned was to create a city commission on aging. We were the only, one of the only cities of our size who didn't have a commission on aging in the state. Denver's had one since the 70s, and lots of other cities in the state have one. We didn't have one. We thought that it would be an important voice for all aging residents in the city. The Commission on Aging can advise the mayor and council on different issues and sort of look at everything that happens in the city through that aging lens. So we just ensure that there's someone looking out for seniors and for all people who are aging through that commission. And so that happened last year. That commission was created. There's 11 folks on that commission, and it's up and running since about last August. Those meetings are public. So if that's something you want to keep an eye on, the work of the Commission on Aging, that's something you can do really easily to keep an eye on the agendas and the minutes, and you can attend those meetings as well if you wanted to do that. And then, at Innovations in Aging, there's so many things that are difficult, so many things that are challenges that we're working on, but there are so many great things, too. We're working on a lifelong housing certification program. This would be a great way to volunteer if someone was interested. We have received a grant to train senior volunteers to go into a person's home and recommend some changes or modifications they might make so they could stay in their home as long as possible or as long as is reasonable for them. It's called the Lifelong Housing Certification Program, so keep an eye out for that. That's coming soon. And we're also working on creating a portal for services and resources for the community. This was something else that was recommended in Age Friendly, and a lot of people said, gosh, there are so many great things happening, there's so many services, so many resources available, but can we create a one-stop shop so people can find those services and resources really easily? So we've been working with a group of people from different organizations throughout the city to create a user-friendly, really easily usable website where people can go and find all the resources and services that they might need. And so that's something that's coming too that I would keep an eye out for. Now that Manitou Springs is also age-friendly, we're working on creating an age-friendly Pikes Peak designation so that the whole region can be age-friendly, and we can make sure that we're working together as a region and making sure that we're creating a city that's livable for people of all ages. And I'm sure I've gone well over my time, but I think that's it from me. Thank you.
Great. Thank you very much. I really appreciate it. Do you want to do question and answer now, or can I go back on specific ones? Okay. Last week we ran out of question and answer time because there's so much going on. So I'd like to go back and ask specific questions of each of you. And if someone else wants to jump in on that, I'm just fine with it if you have ideas. But Don, I'd like to start with you. What are the positive things that you've seen now and maybe in the next 5 years you think are going to continue on a good slope, if I can put it that way?
For the city then, or what areas are you talking about?
For the city, from your point of view.
Well, obviously the thing that's going real well right now is the interaction between the city council and the executive branch. We went to the strong mayor, or council, it's formally known as the council mayor. Everybody knows it's a strong mayor. Prior to 2011, we had the city manager. The city manager reported to council, and there's 9 members on council. And in 2011, we switched, and we went to now the mayor is a separately elected official, and so he is the chief executive of the city and the chief administrative officer. If you notice, I did not say he's the chief executive officer. Under Steve Bach, which was the first strong mayor, Steve never had any government background at all and really did not understand separate and equal branches of government. He really did think he was the CEO and that council was nothing but a speed bump in there. And so a lot of times in the headlines in the paper were against the arguments between council and Steve Bach. And I was part of that for the last 2 years and an instigator of it, especially when it came to the budget. Because the legislative branch, the power of the purse is one of the things that is a legislative branch. As I looked to find out why this was happening, our city charter was very ambiguous or very silent. City charter says all administrative duties belong to the mayor, all legislative duties belong to the council, and that's all it says. So when Mayor Southers got elected in June of 2015, one of his goals was to improve the relationship with council. And he worked on that right away. We were very receptive to that. And then we gave him 6 months, and Mayor Southers does have a strong government background. And so in 2016, we formed a code scrub committee, and we took us about a year and a half, but we went through and we found those sections of charter that were silent or ambiguous. And instead of having to rewrite the charter, which requires a vote of the people, we just went in and adopted code that made it more clear so that in the future, if you get another bad mayor or if you get a bad council, if you get 5 of us that decide that we want to take over and run the city and we're going to vote in all these ordinances, we tried to take the personalities out of it and put processes in place. And I think that's probably the good thing. The mayor comes up for re-election a year from now. All indications are he'll run again, and I think, right now it's really great, but it is personalities. Hopefully we fix that and make it a process. So that's, I think, is probably the best thing I see going in the city right now.
Thank you very much. Did anyone else have a positive part they wanted to spin on or that needs to continue? Okay. Oh, yes, sir.
I think I would just add that when you look over the last week or so, news comes out. This is the number 2 best place to live in the United States based on U.S. News and World Report. Pretty tremendous. If you look at the Space Foundation had their symposium here over the past week, and so what came out of that was there should be a lot of growth based in that industry, a lot of which will take place here. So there's a lot of hope going forward for a continued technological base for employment. I think when you tie that back then to UCCS and some of the programs that they have, our biggest education partner, really very close between UCCS and Pikes Peak Community College, is tremendous. And when you look at how agile and adaptive our community college system is here to create programs to meet industry needs really in a short amount of time, whether it's in home building because construction can't keep up, or whether it's in cyber because you can't keep up with the computer and that type of industry, there's a lot of opportunity here. And so we, from the military perspective, look to leverage that all the time because it's just a great community to be in. But I would say those are a couple other additional positive things for the community here to leverage.
Thank you, sir. I really appreciate that. What I'm picking up is there's a lot of things going on, and what Claire pointed out, there's like goals out there already in place. So maybe we don't have to come up with goals. We just need to be aware of those goals and work towards them, and maybe pick the ones that feel the closest to us. Bill, I wanted to ask you about how does I know, yeah, this is off script. Yeah, this is just one. I only have one answer. How do you see the religious community and UCCS working together? Can they? How do you see that on campus or off campus also?
You promised me soft questions. I actually did some checking. There are 10 religious organizations that are part of the website at UCCS. I think there's 2 that are connected directly with churches, Red Rocks is one, and I think a UCC church is the other. Then the normal Navigators, Young Life, Fellowship of Christian Athletes are there, and then there's a handful of others that are religious in terms of their focus. The Church of Latter-day Saints, Mormon Church, has one of the strong ones. So there's already opportunities there. We're dealing, in this population, of course, we're dealing largely with youth or young people who are in that 18 to 22, 23 year age group. Many of them living in the dorms or in apartments around the area are away from mom and dad. And I think our experience here at Ascension, we see what happens even after confirmation, say nothing about after high school, after graduating from high school. And so even though the numbers are large, connecting with that group, I think, is a challenge. I would say that for individual churches like ourselves, it would be difficult to have a significant impact, a significant thing there, unless we had put a lot of energy into it. But I think that we need to maybe reach out a little bit more, including, I was just thinking about this as we're talking here today. We have more and more students who are coming from areas that are outside this local area here, so coming from even Nebraska, Kansas, New Mexico, etc. And so reaching out to maybe churches there at an appropriate time, say in the springtime, this time, making aware that we're here, and if we have programs, we can maybe attract a handful, and I say handful, I'm saying we're not going to attract 100, but we could attract now students that were in Lutheran churches there, and we could communicate with those churches. And it might be worth just taking a stab at that, an effort at that. And what happens then in that community, of course, is that if you can get a few, networking takes over, and now they'll bring their friends in that. And so instead of trying to put together a major initiative, if you will, maybe starting with something like that. But it would take some focus here on the part of one of the boards to make that happen.
Thank you very much. Claire, I wanted to ask you about what do you see as the most difficult situation you're finding for seniors and aging, and if you have any ideas or what you're seeing that is working or maybe is not working, because sometimes to know where you want to go, you need to know where not to go, right? So, thank you.
I would say there's a couple actually that I would highlight. I think isolation is a big one. I read an article the other day from AARP that said that that someone who's isolated, that it's like smoking a pack a day of cigarettes, the effect that it has on their body. And so I think that that is really key for our community, to make sure that we are finding ways for seniors to get involved, to stay involved, to make connections, to make relationships, and to access the care and resources that they need. So that really all goes back to transportation, which I think is a huge piece, and to that kind of portal idea. So we have a fantastic area agency on aging here. I don't know if you all have heard about the AAA. It's required by law that every county has an area agency on aging. Ours is fantastic. It's for El Paso, Teller, and Park counties. It's down on Colorado. And they do a wonderful, wonderful job at sharing information and resources and services. They do a great job at helping people with Medicare and Medicaid and getting them help with insurance. But not many people know about that. Silver Key is a wonderful resource. My office is at Silver Key, and we used to be right across the hallway from the folks who answer the phones, and we'd listen to the questions and the phone calls that they got every day, and they would get a huge number of calls with just a variety of questions from, I can't even tell you the number of questions that they answer on a daily basis about just a huge variety of random things. So that what that says to me is that people don't know what they don't know, right? Like they don't know how to access something. They don't know if they need it or when they need it. So I think that this portal idea is really important so that we can help people access the care and services that they need. I had one other thing, but I forgot my train of thought. But I think that those are kind of the three main areas where we really could use some attention.
Maybe changing hats here a little bit, but what Claire says is spot on. I think in what I've seen in some of the things, not necessarily the UCCS, but because we don't have many people in their 80s there, but we do have programs. In fact, retired people can, on a space available basis, sit in on classes if there's a space available there, and so we have that. There's also a group I just recently found out about called Curiosity Limited, which have faculty come and speak once a month, I think, and they're primarily senior citizens that are there. But what I was going to mention was that I think we're just hitting the tip of the iceberg here and what we've seen these last 2 weeks in terms of issues. I'll talk about a program that LFS Rocky Mountains has started in Denver. It's called a guardianship program. And this is oriented towards those people who do not have family or friends or whatever that can take care of them. And so I'll give you an instance of an individual. Lady was in the hospital, major hospital in Denver. Whatever was wrong with her, whatever the medical problem was, had been taken care of a month ago. It was going to take another 5 weeks for that individual, for the hospital to be able to go through the process they had to go through. Problem was that she was not mentally able to make a decision herself, and there was no one to make a decision for her. So whatever number you want to pick, say $1,500 a day was costing the hospital to keep her in a bed there. The nurses, medical staff didn't like it because they want to take care of her. None of us like to stay in the hospital any longer than we have to. So the program that we've started now, we have a few hospitals, a few patients in this, called a guardianship program. LFS is able to go to the courts, become a guardian for that individual, and then they can figure out where that individual goes, what kind of a facility to go. The hospital pays LFS, actually the hospital gives LFS a negotiated amount of money which goes into basically an endowment. LFS then moves them into a facility. Because they're a guardian, they have to, on a regular basis, like I think it's weekly, the person who's responsible has to visit that individual. But also they do case management, because the other problem with these individuals is if they're in the hospital because they have not, say, had a good diet, they leave the hospital, same thing's going to happen again. LFS then, through case managers, will visit, will monitor, etc., what they're doing. And to stop them coming back to the hospital, which again, Medicaid and Medicare and etc. don't like that, and they find the hospitals. And the medical staffs are all over it in Denver, so we're working on that. So my question this is the way it works, my question to the woman who's running this at the last LFS board meeting was, so when are you going to move this to Colorado Springs? I said, I'm over 65, I have insurance, okay, I have no friends or family, and obviously I have a neurological problem, so, and she says, you have to move to Denver, you're either going to have to move to Denver or wait.
Thank you very much. I'd like to open up to questions from the congregation. Good luck. Thank you. I guess it goes to city council. Yeah. No, everyone said, well, we'll just let Don handle that.
So you're talking the accessibility, but the example you're using is the 1 acre that just got sold to Gresham Housing for $1. So that was, that land was donated to the city by Norwood 5 years ago. It said if we were to dispose of it within 3 years, it had to go to a public purpose. It's been 5 years, so we could have turned around and sold it. So what happened on that land is the real estate folks put out a buck slip to all the organizations, all the departments inside the city. Does anybody want this 1 acre of land? Nobody came up and said it other than Steve Posey, who runs our affordable housing. He says, yes, I like to do that. Given a lot of this size, it's going to have to be a high-density place, so apartment type of complex. And I like it to go out to Gresham Housing to go do that. He followed everything in the manual that, in the real estate manual, we buck slipped it. He was the only one that stepped forward. If Parks had stepped forward, then it would have been a decision in there. I voted against that. I was the lone council person to vote against it. The only reason that I voted against it is that he did not go to anybody else other than Gresham Housing to see if they were qualified to build this senior-assisted, low-income senior-assisted housing to go there. That's the history. To get to your question as to whether we look at accessibility or anything else, from the city council side, we are not allowed to do that. It is, it's going to come to us because right now it's zone commercial. They'll have to be rezoned residential. So that'll come to us, and it'll come to us under a quasi-judicial hearing. The areas that we look for are, is it compatible with the surrounding area? Will it be safe to build on that? So the criteria that we look at, and I got to be very careful here because when it comes to us, I got to say I'm willing to make my decision on everything that's in the packet and what I hear on. So let me say right now, I have not made a decision how I'm going to vote when that zone change comes to us. But nowhere in that criteria is there anything for accessibility or how are people going to be going around. We had a very similar argument in front of council just back in March on the Ridge apartments that are being built down by the Safeway off of 115 and Academy Boulevard. And a lot of the people living right around there said that school district, I think it's 12, does not do busing at all. So if that's low-income housing, probability not everybody's going to have a car. How are the students going to get to school? And unfortunately, that is not something that council can factor in and say. I mean, there was one council member, Tom Strand, said, it just doesn't feel right. You know, there's no reason I can vote no, but I'm voting no because it doesn't feel right to go in there. That could very much open us up to the people that were building it, take the city to court that says you voted against this and you didn't follow your own procedures. And what the judge would have done is reverse. He can't tell us that we have to allow it in there, but he can send it back to us with instructions that you got to only do that things in there. So from council's side of the house, we do have our hands tied. That doesn't mean that you can't do anything, but I guess one of my favorite things to do is throw the mayor on their bus. This is where you need to go talk to the mayor. This is now an executive decision under the executive branch decision under the day-to-day operations of the city. you really need to get in there and say, hey, with no housing, no there, how are you going to do that, and really get him or get Steve Posey to stand up and answer those questions for you. What are you doing with Craig Blewett, who's the head of transportation? Are you going to put in city mayor? Are you going to put in other bus routes? Because what we do is we provide the money to the bus system. We as council, we don't say where the buses are going to run, what time they're going to run, et cetera, et cetera. So I'm sorry for the long answer, but it's a very complicated issue. But you really, if you are concerned about that, the time is to go now to reach out to the mayor and ask those questions and have him or his staff give you those answers.
Thank you very much. Definitely.
Thanks to each of you for coming. Thank you, John, for moderating, and to all of you for coming to listen. This is part of our purpose mapping work that we're doing, and we really hope that this helps us to inform where we hear God calling us to in the next few years. So let's close with a word of prayer. God, we give you thanks for those willing to come and speak to us and for the perspectives they share. We ask that you be with them in their ministries. We ask that you bless you bless Fort Carson, UCCS, our seniors, and our city. Please look over us. Give us words of wisdom that we might know where to go from these perspectives. In Jesus' name, amen.